Okay, so now we know how to set up using a remote Syslog server on a Cisco device using SDM. What are the benefits of doing this? One of the biggest benefits is persistent. So we saw that there's different locations the logging process on a Cisco iOS device can send the messages. We saw those internal ones that were monitor, console, buffer. Unfortunately, the only place it actually stores them is in the buffer. If you don't see it on the monitor or the console session, then it's gone if it's not being logged to the local device's buffer, which is cool, except that the buffers are lost on reload and also can be cleared. We saw the button on SDM that'll clear it. That button just basically invokes the command clear log. If you have priority level 15, then you can go ahead and clear that out. The other limitation with the buffers is once they're full, they'll overwrite themselves. So if you get a ton of messages or you want to find something that happened a long time ago, there's a chance that it's going to be actually overwritten. Syslog servers allow for you to store your Syslog messages for longer periods of time because they're being sent to another device, and that device is not going to have to overwrite its memory. It's not going to lose those messages on reload. It's going to have them stored out to a text file or something else that will survive a reload. For troubleshooting event correlation across devices, Syslog servers are invaluable. So if you got an issue that affects more than one router, say router 1, for whatever reason, it lost all its OSPF neighbors, you can check in the logs on router 1 and hopefully find the problem, but then you might want to go to router 2, 3, 4, 5, blah blah blah. This gets to be a pain in the ass because you're going from device to device looking at the logs. It's nice to have one place where you can take a look at all the event logs from all the different devices and correlate from there. And there's actually software that's created to do the correlation for you. I know Cisco Mars does that for some of the security stuff. There's also other stuff out there that will do this with event logs on Syslog servers. So this is a really good troubleshooting tool. Timestamps, yeah, that can come in handy. Generally, you want to have your devices all be using the same time, so that if an event happened at 1 p.m. on router 1 that affected router 2 at 1 p.m. or 1:01 or whatever the hell, you want those times to be at least relatively close so you can have correlation. If your time on router 1 says it's 5 a.m. on January 1st, 1993, and router 5 says it's 7:30 p.m. on March 22nd, 2010, obviously the timestamps aren't going to do you a lot of good. What's nice is that Syslog servers generally put their own timestamp on there, so then you can use that to help correlate events if your Cisco devices have disparate time sources or timestamps on them. Keep in mind that the timestamp on the Syslog server itself is going to be when it received that message. So if it took a little while for it to get there, then it's not going to be the exact time that when it started, but generally good enough for government work. Searching and sorting, well, with SDM this doesn't become such a big deal because SDM actually has a nice searching and sorting GUI on it. Of course, it's limited to the messages in the logging buffer, but Syslog servers generally give you some very good tools for searching and sorting through the Syslog messages. And then finally, storage of logs. This is like persistence, except this is more like a permanent or long-term storage. From a Cisco device, you can't really save out the logs locally. Well, that's not quite true. There are some platforms that will allow you to send your logs to a flash file, some local memory that does survive reloads. Switches will do that. Some of the new ISR routers, I believe, can do that too. Anyways, it's much better to do this on a remote server so that you can go ahead and just do a backup of that server or save the data out to tape or whatever and keep a more permanent record of your Syslog messages. And a lot of industries will mandate that you do keep these messages. I work in an industry that we are regulated and we have to keep, for security audits or just to keep the government off of our case, we have to keep all our Syslog messages. So that's why we have 4 or 5 different Syslog servers set up based on location so that we don't lose these. I'll make the summary really short because I went over a lot of the benefits on the last slide. I will say here, I'll get in my soapbox and say that while a remote Syslog server is what we're talking about here, is considered a necessity in larger networks, I think that any network that has, you can even argue just a single device would benefit greatly from this. And like I said, you can just set up a Linux box and run a Syslog daemon there. This doesn't have to be anything fancy. You don't have to go buy multi-million-dollar network monitoring software for a Syslog server. So keep that in mind when you're designing a network, that you really do want to have a Syslog solution. Like I said, I've already gone over the advantages, so I'm not going to repeat those here. Basic Syslog server configuration on a Cisco device is ridiculously easy for remote host. It's just logging host followed by the IP address or the host name. Cisco SDM allows you to configure the local system Syslog buffer, and we saw that earlier, as well as configure the router to use a remote Syslog server. That's it though. It doesn't let you do configuration for console syslogs or monitoring syslogs. Not a big deal, but just know that that is a limitation. And it doesn't let you do a lot of the options that you have at your literally your fingertips when you're using the CLI. Here I say I would strongly advise reviewing the syslog configuration on the CLI to get a better grasp of the various options you can configure. So get yourself into a router and take a look at, even if it's just jumping into configuration, doing logging space question mark to see what those configuration options are, and then maybe taking a look at those on the Cisco documentation. There is another lesson that's almost exactly like this, but covers the same topic but is focused on the CLI. I would say definitely check that out, especially if you're going to go ahead and configure this in the wild, or if you're going to take the CCNA security exam, because you're going to want to know some of the other options that are available, in this case only in the CLI. Okay, well, thanks for joining me in the Packet Lab today. I hope to see you over in the lab section of this. I think the lab section will be very beneficial here, because you'll see this in action, and with the GUI it's really nice to see this live and in action, because I can tell you which buttons to click, but it's easier to see it quote unquote in action. I've said in action too many times. Anyways, I hope this helps you on your road to network greatness, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.